Okay, so what I would like to start with is I would like to start by going over First Samuel chapters 5 through 9, which was your extra reading for Thursday. And I'm not gonna say a ton about these chapters. I basically picked out maybe two major points, two major important things in these 4 or 5 chapters that I wanted to highlight. But in general, I'm going to try to keep these Bible videos as short as possible. So let's jump right in. A couple of things that I thought were interesting and important. Number one, the Ark of the Covenant as an object, as a symbol. I think warrants spending a little bit of time thinking about here. Number one, is the way that the people have come to treat the ark is something that I think we must focus on and that we must take to heart, especially as we're trying to do maybe some application for ourselves. The people have really began treating the ark as a good luck charm or some kind of magic weapon, and it's not difficult to see why, right? Because up to this point, the ark has been used as the thing that goes first. It has led the people into the promised land. Um, Way back in the book of Joshua, it the priests stand in the water with the ark, and that seems to be what dries up the water and allows the people to cross over on dry land into Canaan. And then we have battle after battle where the commandment is the ark goes forward, the ark goes first, and this leads to success in battle. So I let's try not to stand in judgment of the people for this point. However, it is going to be the case that the people are making a mistake here because the important thing about the ark is the presence of God. The ark is intended to point the people to the importance of the presence of God in their midst. And that is what leads to blessing. That is what leads to success. That is what leads to the world being right, the world being as it should be, because God is dwelling with his people and the people are dwelling with their God. This is a covenant, right? This is a symbolically important covenant object. Um, and the people are, in treating it the way that they have begun to treat it, have made the ark itself an object of worship. And this is causing a lot of problems. So, as a result of what the people are doing incorrectly, God's going to cause the ark to be captured by the Philistines. And I identified two reasons why I believe that God allowed this to be captured. Reason number one, um, the Philistines themselves. God has something for the Philistines in this to show the Philistines that God is sovereign over them and even over their gods. It's a fascinating little scene, right, where they stick the ark in their own room, in their own trophy room, their statue room, and in the morning when they come back in to check on it, the statues of their gods have become broken and mutilated and disfigured by the ark, by the presence of God in the room. So that's important. I think that's a really, really key little passage there. Secondly, God has done this to show the Israelites that his presence and power is not confined to the ark. He's teaching them, do not idolize the ark itself. The ark is simply pointing you to me. And this, I think, is really, really key. And man, how much Christian application could we do here today? If we were preaching on this today, it wouldn't be hard. It wouldn't be difficult to come up with a list of things that Christians, even good things, that represent and point us to the presence of God in our lives, and yet we idolize those things. In fact, you might want to take some time to come up with a list of those things yourselves. You could stop the video right here and come up with a few Christian religious items and objects that maybe Christians have a danger of idolizing in the same way that the ark is. The second thing that I wanted to point it out in these 4 or 5 chapters is the figure of Saul himself. Saul, as the first king, is a really, really important figure in many ways, of course. But at this point, from what we've read, what's important about Saul is that he had all of the physical characteristics that the people of Israel believed at that time, in that culture, would make him a great leader. He was tall. He was handsome. His physical presence commanded respect. So, he was strong, I think, it tells us. So this is important to keep in mind. Certainly, as Saul fails and we see who God chooses next, it's going to become really important. Okay, so next let's go ahead and move into what you guys read for today. So we are now in 1 Samuel 11 through 13 and 15 through 17. So let's go through some of the things that I picked out as important points in this section of the reading. So Saul becomes king, and Saul's reign begins victoriously. It's a good start. Saul defeats the Ammonites, the chapter 11 tells us, at Yabesh Gilead. And if you noticed, Saul even begins here with a really good move. Not only is he successful in leading the army to victory, but he rightly attributes the victory to God. And if you want to follow along, I'm looking specifically at verse 13. He says, God is the reason. We should worship God as a result of the victory. However, things turn south very, very quickly for Saul. The first thing that Saul does is he makes a hasty sacrifice, though he is not authorized to do so. Saul is not a Levite. He is not a priest. He is not the one who can or should be making sacrifices on behalf of the people. So the question is why? Why did Saul do it? Well, obviously Saul feared that the people were about to desert him. And he was ready to have even a bigger military victory. He thought that they could win another battle. And he was waiting on Samuel. Samuel was late getting there. And Saul couldn't wait. He had to do something. Saul then, like, if we ask what is really the sin of Saul in this, is it that he overshot his authority by making a sacrifice that he shouldn't? I mean, there's something to that in and of itself being problematic, but I think the problem here really goes deeper than that. The problem is that Saul is willing to use and manipulate the worship of God through the sacrificial system for his own personal and military gain. So, as a result, very, very early on, very early into his reign, he is informed by Samuel that his kingdom will be cut short, and that he will not reign for long, and that someone else will be coming to take his throne from him. The next important little section in this part of the reading, I think, is Samuel pleading with the people to follow God and to turn away from foreign gods. Samuel then promises to pray for them and promises them that God will never leave them. And this is a heartfelt farewell by Samuel. And there's a lot of key themes I think that's captured here in this farewell address by Samuel, but we'll leave it at that for now, just to get through this quickly. Saul again disobeys then after his first big problem. They're just going to start coming more and more, quicker and quicker. They're going to start piling up on each other, Saul's issues. Saul again disobeys God. This time it's because he does not follow God's commandment to completely destroy the Amalekites. So a few things here about this story. Number one, this is going to bring back some of the same discussion that we had in Joshua leading the people to conquer Canaan, and God commands the people to completely wipe out, right? Completely destroy, completely devote to destruction all the cities that you find. And we have the same thing here. The Amalekites, they say wipe, God says wipe them out. Do not leave a remnant. Do not leave them. If you do, why not? If you do, they will stick around. They will become a thorn in your side. You will begin to do exactly what happened all throughout the book of Judges, which is following after their gods and turning away from the one true God and worship of Him. And this is the worst case scenario for God. We have to keep this in mind. This is the worst thing that people can do, is to forsake the real God for these false gods that they find around them. So, why did God have them wipe out the whole people? Certainly to avoid the pitfalls that we saw throughout the book of Judges. Also, though, God desires justice. God desires to enact justice, and He's desiring to wipe out what is truly an evil people group. The Amalekites, even among other Canaanite groups, we have found writings that the Amalekites were like the nastiest of the nasty. These are people who are just very, very ruthless in war and with people that they have captured. They have really, really extreme accounts of the torture that the Amalekites would put captured people through. So really terrible people. A people group who absolutely engaged in child sacrifice. Just truly awful practices by the Amalekites. So there is some judgment being rendered here too on the Amalekite people. Now, why did Saul disobey here the second time? He disobeys, number one, for personal gain, for possessions and riches, because he number one, he keeps some of the possessions, and God said, don't do that. Don't keep anything. Destroy it all. Get rid of it all. He's going to keep things for his own, wealth. He's going to gain possessions. He's going to gain riches from keeping some of these things. Also, let's not overlook that his own status is going to be boosted, because one of the things he doesn't do is kill the king. He keeps the king alive, which is very interesting. And in those times, in those days, to have a rival king as your prisoner was thought to be a much more prestigious thing than even having killed that king, because that king basically has to serve you. They're like your servant, and that would really up your status in the scheme of things. And so we see Saul doing this all for his own personal benefit. So because of this, and I think one of the important things that we should highlight here is a true lack of repentance. It looks like Saul repents for this, but if you really go back and read that section again, Saul is sorry that he got caught, right? He's not sorry that he's done this and that he's disobeyed the Lord. He's sorry that he was found out and that things didn't go his way. So this is going to send Saul into an absolute tailspin that's going to eventually result in his destruction. He tries to kill David multiple times, as you read, out of pure jealousy of David, as he begins to realize that David is God's anointed. David will be the next king, not Saul. And that brings us into how I want to finish this section, and that is God choosing David. When Samuel goes to Bethlehem to find the next king, we find God rejecting. So let's hold this story in juxtaposition to the choosing of Saul as the first king. God's rejecting many of the cultural ideas of what the people thought made a good leader, because he chooses not the elder sons of Jesse. He chooses not the biggest, the strongest, the tallest, the most manly, to put things bluntly, of the people that Samuel found when he got to Jesse's house. Instead, he chooses a young, skinny shepherd boy, and that's important. That the fact that David was acting as a shepherd for the family, the shepherding role at this time in this culture was a servant's job. Either a servant's job, or if you had enough sons, you could make your youngest son do it, which is exactly what we find here in this story. It's David, the youngest, the boy, who has to go out and do the grunt work of keeping the sheep. That would not have been a job for the elder, more prestigious sons in the family. And the fact that it was a youngest in general is important as well, right? And we've come into contact with this already, that God sometimes chooses the younger over the older as a way of showing that he doesn't have to play by the rules of culture, and that God is not bound by the way that people have set up their own societies and their own cultures to work. So I think this is really important, and this is going to have really important implications as we move forward in Scripture. Certainly when we get to the Gospels, we're going to find Jesus doing the same thing, and that's going to be really important for us to make these connections and show this is what God does. God does sometimes come and buck the system, and he says, no, we're not going to play by your society's rules. Why? That's the big question here, right? Theologically. Why would God choose the youngest over the oldest? Just to say, I don't have to play by your rules? No, he goes deeper than that, I'm pretty sure. Certainly there's some of that aspect going on here. But to go deeper than that, let's think about David being this ordinary, young, not impressive boy. And let's think about the things that God plans to do through David. I mean, David is going to be the figure. I mean, maybe right up there with Abraham and Moses for the people of Israel throughout the rest of their history, right? David is going to be on that level of the most important figures in the history of their nation. The things that God is going to do through David are incredible. They are amazing. They are remarkable. And choosing then this, at least at the start of God's choosing of David, an unremarkable, unmiraculous, unimportant, ordinary kind of boy, God is showing who is really doing it, right? This has been a common theme for us already throughout the Old Testament. It is God. It is clearly God who is extraordinary. It is clearly God who is miraculous. It is God who is accomplishing all of these things that we're going to read about through the life of David. It is not David. That's the important part. It is God and God's ability to win victory and to make the nation of Israel great. David will now spend the next 15 years, though, after he's anointed, waiting for Saul to actually be replaced and to actually take the throne. David spends the next 15 years in relative obscurity and suffering. And that should not be overlooked as we're going to start to make connections and do some of our typologies in the redemptive historical lens. David is like the epitome of a type of Jesus, of a type of Christ. The New Testament is going to make more David references as it does its own typology of Jesus than any other figure in all of Scripture. David is the prototypical type of Christ. So this is going to be important that David spends this time waiting for his throne, waiting to be installed as the true king, the next king of Israel. Certainly, we're going to find Jesus in a similar boat. I mean, the part of Jesus' life that we don't even know much about, right? He waits until his 30s to enact his ministry and to start his ministry. And certainly he's going to have to wait quite a long time before he's exalted to the right hand of God and takes the throne of heaven again. David and Goliath. We've talked about the story of David and Goliath a little bit, so we don't have to belabor this one too very much. But I do want to circle back around to it a little bit. Let's remember that one of the points that we made as we talked about David and Goliath is that we are not David in the story. If we are going to put ourselves in a place of the story, if we're going to preach this to people, most of the time it's preached like you are David. You need to be like David. You can't have the faith that David had, and if so, you will earn God's blessings. You will defeat your giants. You will slay them, and you will reap the benefits by being strong and courageous enough, as David was. But as we said already, as we kind of previewed the story of David and Goliath earlier, we are Saul. We are the person who is standing over on the sidelines, peeing down our leg because we realize we cannot defeat our giants. We cannot defeat the things that plague us and torment us in our life. We've tried. We've spent years. I mean, by the time you guys are my age, this will be such a clear thing that there are things that you can do your very, very best to just muster up enough faith and enough courage to try to defeat, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work because we can't do it. And like just as Saul realizes that he could not go and defeat that giant in Goliath. But the ultimate message of this story is good news, because it does point us to the gospel, because it does point us to the figure of Jesus Christ himself. Certainly we are not strong enough, we are not courageous enough to defeat the giants in our own lives, but the good news is God is, Christ is, and he has already done so. The victory is won, the battle is won, just as Saul and the rest of the Israelites got to reap the benefits of David going and defeating the giant Goliath, and Israel wins the battle because their champion defeats the champion of the Philistines. We get to reap the benefits of Christ's victory for us. And I'll stop right here and let you guys have a little ending discussion time of what you think that is. What are their benefits? What do we get to reap as Christians because of the battle and the victory that Christ has won? Most of the New Testament is basically taking that question on and trying to help us to answer that. But I think it's a good opportunity for you to have a little quick brainstorm. That'll be a good exercise for you guys to make just a short list of things that we get to reap as the spoils of victory, the spoils of war for Christ's victory on our behalf. Okay, that's it for today on this. So finish up with just a quick discussion of that. And we'll be back tomorrow with the next section. And I'll be looking forward to that.